We've already seen how the state of California is different. Now let's consider how California government is different. First, let's consider the differences between the California Legislature and the United States Congress. In California, the lower chamber of the legislature is known as the Assembly, not the House of Representatives. And the lower house has only 80 members, not 435 as in Washington. The California Senate is also smaller, with only 40 members rather than 100. Like their Washington counterparts, members of the state assembly serve only 2-year terms, but members of the state Senate serve 4-year terms, not 6-year terms like United States senators. One of the biggest differences between the California State Legislature and the U.S. Congress is the fact that the California Legislature has term limits. Term limits were originally adopted in the late 1990s, and originally, members could only serve 6 years in the Assembly and 8 years in the Senate. Those terms were considered to be a little too short, and so voters in 2012 passed Proposition 140. Proposition 140 established a maximum of 12 years of service in both chambers combined. There are also major differences between the executive branch in California and Washington. One of the biggest differences is that the governor possesses the line item veto, which the president does not. The line item veto gives the governor the ability to veto parts of a bill without vetoing the entire bill. This gives the governor substantial power, but he can still be overridden by a 2/3 majority vote of both houses of the state legislature. The line item veto was adopted to reduce state spending, but it clearly hasn't worked. There's another big difference between the president and the California governor. In Washington, the president gets to choose his executive officers. But in California, most executive officers, such as the Attorney General, are not appointed by the governor, but rather elected by the voters. This means that the governor and the lieutenant governor and other members of the executive branch may belong to different political parties. Another major difference is that California governors can be kicked out of office by the voters in a recall election before their term is up. This doesn't happen very often, but it did happen in 2003 when newly elected Governor Gray Davis was recalled and replaced by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. There are also significant differences between the California Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court. The California Supreme Court has only 7 justices, not 9. More importantly, unlike federal judges, California judges do not sit for life. Rather, justices on the California Supreme Court have 12-year terms. And if they wish to continue serving at the end of the 12 years, they have to be re-elected to another term. Another difference between California and the federal government is that California must balance its budget every year. But this difference is less significant than it seems because California still has debt in the form of bonds. The final difference between California and the federal government is that California has a form of direct democracy. This means that California voters have the ability to vote directly on laws and constitutional amendments in initiatives and referendums. Initiatives are laws and constitutional amendments that are placed on the ballot by voters who've collected signatures. Referendums give voters the opportunity to approve or disapprove laws that have already been passed by the state legislature. This gives California voters a high amount of control over state law, and they use it. Usually they get the opportunity to vote on more than a dozen initiatives every year.